Hey, this is G4T, Survive and Thrive TV. We're here with Tom. He's the owner of Armatherm. It's a non-profit foundation that basically produces products involved in safety,
Yes.
fire safety,
Yes.
and neutralizers, all different types of products. You've been a doctor in physics
Physics, chemistry.
for over 30 years.
Some 40 years now.
Wow.
So I've been making different things for different companies in polyols, you know, and renewable energy sources and new materials for green sources and things like that for years.
And the story we have today is regarding the Gulf spill. You actually
Yes.
have some oil from the Gulf spill.
Yes, I was sent this from the Department of Fish and Game in Louisiana, you know, and here we'll let Mr. George read that. And it is pretty explanatory where it came from. It gives an ID and who sent it, what day it came, and all that, and so on, registration number and everything. And then we have this oil. This oil is full of sulfates. I tested it in many different ways. I did a hydrolysis test on it, and this oil is just full of sulfates. It was taken directly from the Gulf spill.
And there's a problem with oil that's full of sulfates. It's bad oil, correct?
Yes, it's very difficult to fractionate oil that's full of sulfates. So I'm wondering...
You're talking over an 8-year period, BP was pumping millions of gallons of this stuff out of the Gulf.
Yes.
And what were they doing with it?
Well, they joint ventured, I believe, with the Bush administration to make a well. It was 8,000 feet deep, and when the well came up, since they entered into an agreement as a joint partnership, somebody had to fund it. So I guess half of it was funded by the American public, and the other half of it was funded by BP, and then it was reinsured through AIG, Transamericana, and Lloyd's of London. So when the oil well came up, the oil came up as this oil, and this oil is highly sulfated oil. I don't think this oil can be fractionated because it hardly burns at 5,000 degrees. So it would be awful crummy oil. So the agreement that they had with Mr. Bush, it evolved into the Obama administration. This oil then would come up as a question whether or not it was a viable fuel source. Now, when you see the platform burn in the Gulf, what you've seen is a huge plume of burning fuel up in the air. However, what you didn't see was the oil floating on the surface of the water on fire. Oil, when it burns on the surface of the water. I never saw any of that. So when they sent me this oil test, it was to find out whether or not it was full of sulfates. Sulfates make it very difficult to fractionate the oil into usable fuel. Well, that means that if the United States entered into an agreement with BP to make usable oil, they didn't ever come up with usable oil. This oil is unusable. Now, if this oil is unusable, where did the oil go? All right, now we know that we saw the gases coming out of the platform. That had to be a methane hydride, not oil, because the oil would have been on fire on the surface of the water. All right, that also means that if BP went to Mr. Obama and said, okay, we can't use this oil, but on the other hand, we have this great, you know, renewable energy methane fuel. It's a green source, which, yes, they would have been able to use. However, they wouldn't have been able to use the oil. All right, this oil is worthless. We're going to prove it right now. The yellow color, that's sulfates. This is 5,000 degrees.
We're using nap gas right now.
This oil should burn, and this oil should catch on fire. This is pretty well worthless oil. So then the question comes up, where did this oil go? We know it won't burn. And if it can't be fractionated, I'm sure that the people at BP didn't take it back and dump it in their harbor back in England. They didn't take it to a toxic dump. Where did this oil go? It's worthless oil.
And you're talking not millions of gallons, you're talking millions of barrels.
Years of pumping it, because it seems to me if somebody were astute and they were checking it out, they'd check out and see if BP shipped methane hydride or whether they shipped the oil. Where did the oil go? If it's anywhere, it's at the bottom of the Gulf. And if it's in the bottom of the Gulf, how much of it's there?
Which makes sense. They'd have to engineer an oil spill to, I mean, basically 8 years of dumping oil.
Well, they have a problem in the Gulf because all of those huge cyclones that come up in the Gulf, they'll stir that stuff up. And now, not only did we pay for the joint venture with BP, if that exists, we paid the taxes to match the cost of manufacturing this oil, plus we paid the damages in taxes for the oil if they joint ventured. I think that should be checked out by somebody who is astute enough to check it out, because not only are we going to pay for those losses, we're going to pay for any that's stirred up from the sea bottom in some of these hurricanes and some of these twisters that come up. I'm sure that's going to stir up more. We'll be paying it in perpetuity forever.
What's the problems with a large amount of sulfates at the bottom of the Gulf?
Well, nothing lives in sulfates except sulfonifers, and sulfonifers are decomposers of sulfate fuels. But the marine life in that area where it's all dumped, they're all going to die. Nothing will live there. It would be a barren wasteland. It would be like the desert.